In today's video, we have all the latest NHL news and rumors to take a look at. Tonight's Rumor Mill, focusing on teams like the Vancouver Canucks, and the Pettersson-Miller saga continues with more information on that front, plus the Carolina Hurricanes, New York Islanders, and Toronto Maple Leafs in today's Rumor Mill. Plus, we have pretty significant news from the NHL waiver wire with the Penguins placing goalie Tristan Jarry there today. Plus, we had a trade between Chicago and Winnipeg, a couple of fines from the Department of NHL Player Safety. The Sabres have their quarter-century teams announced, plus lots of other news, including injury updates and roster moves as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here today, lots of news, some trade rumors, and we'll get into all that here in just a few minutes. First, we want to start with some updates from the Department of NHL Player Safety. We have a couple of fines as a result of last night's NHL action. First up, we had Utah centerman Jack McBain has been fined for high sticking, which the maximum allowed under the CBA is $4,166. That's for an incident that happened last night against the Montreal Canadiens and Brendan Gallagher. And New Jersey defenseman and former Hab Jonathan Kovacevic has been fined as well. That one's a little bit less, just shy of $2,000 for a cross-checking incident against Matthew Tkachuk of the Florida Panthers. Now, as I mentioned, some big news from the NHL waiver wire today. The Pittsburgh Penguins seem to have had enough of Tristan Jarry. They've placed him on waivers, which means he could be picked up by another team, which is probably unlikely. You never know, but it's considering his play this year in the contract, I'm going to guess probably not. 3 years, over $5 million a season for underperforming goaltender likely isn't happening, which means he's probably going to be sent to the American Hockey League. They'll bring up one of their young goalies to work with Alex Nedeljkovic, and they'll try to see if that's going to be an improvement for them. We also have John Ludwig of the Avalanche on waivers today as well. But Tristan Jarry, certainly a couple years back, before we had confirmation of international hockey returning, it was certainly considered a potential front runner for Team Canada. That's certainly gone down the tubes here, and then of course, really ever since the re-signing of Jarry in Pittsburgh, and which would have been one of Dubas's first early moves in his tenure there, it just didn't look good. I mean, Tristan Jarry on his previous contract was very good at times, but also seemed to get hurt a lot. It was inconsistent, up and down. It just when the contract ended, a lot of people thought the Penguins are going in a new direction. They've got new management. We're going to see something different here. And then Dubas brings them back on a 5-year deal. So we're only a couple years into that, and it's certainly not working out. A lot of people thought it wasn't a great signing from the beginning, and well, here we are. So we'll find out tomorrow if he gets picked up. I'm guessing the answer is no, and he'll be reassigned to their AHL affiliate. As I mentioned as well, we had a trade earlier today. Nothing too substantial, but a player in Chicago who does have a decent amount of NHL games for a young player. The Blackhawks today traded young defenseman Isaac Phillips to the Winnipeg Jets for prospect Dmitry Kuzmin. So Kuzmin's not been in the NHL as of yet. They're drafted a year apart. Phillips was from the 2020 draft. Kuzmin was from the 2021 draft. He said with Isaac Phillips in Chicago, has got 56 games of NHL experience now under his belt. Of course, which all come on a young rebuilding Blackhawks team. And obviously they do have a lot of prospects. So clearly, they don't see him being a big part of the future. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made this move. So, a prospect swap, if you will, between the Blackhawks and the Jets. Now, on some injury updates and some roster moves. Today, the Winnipeg Jets sent Dylan Coughlin to the American Hockey League. He did clear waivers a few days back. It hadn't been reassigned as of yet. The Canucks sent down a trio of players today, including Guillaume Brisebois, Lekaramaki, and Max Sasson. They are all expected to play for Abbotsford tonight, and I believe you're probably going to see one of them anyways recalled for tomorrow to Vancouver, because they're going to need an extra forward. So probably Sasson going back up to the big club for another game tomorrow. In LA, they've recalled Sami Helenius. The Lightning have sent Jack Finley back to the American Hockey League. He was recalled just a couple days ago. We'll get to make his NHL debut, but that's come and gone. Back to the HL he goes. And then the Ottawa Senators today returned defenseman Max Gannett So they played in Long Island yesterday, so he was recalled for the road trip because they do have a few players that were kind of banged up and wondering, it's always nice to have an extra player with you when you travel. But now that they're back home, they're home for the next, I think it's 4 or 5, 6 days. They have the next couple games here at home. He's gone to Belleville to play. I think Belleville's actually on the road, if I'm not mistaken, so he probably met up with them on the road. But at this point, Ottawa does have 6 healthy defensemen, but Thomas Chabot did take a nasty puck to the face last night, and he normally after a puck to the face, you go get repaired, and most players come back, but he was cut up so bad, I guess, that for precautionary reasons, they did set him out the rest of the game. So that was like halfway through the first period. So we saw pretty much almost everybody on the Sens blue line make career highs in ice time last night. Jake Sanderson played, I believe it was over 31 minutes. Artem Zub played about 30 minutes. Jensen was way up there. Tyler Clevin had a career high. It was so early in the game that they all were hitting, lots of extra minutes and making up for it. But they played a good game, thankfully. But so depending on Chabot's well-being here, you never know. Maybe they recall somebody else in the coming days. Another situation to make note of, no changes to the roster or injured reserve or anything right now, but there was a situation at Maple Leaf practice this morning with John Tavares. Looks like, because there was a video of it that was posted, it looks like they're doing a drill. He's going into the corner with Chris Tanev, and it just looks like their skates just kind of clicked or something by accident, and Tavares went down kind of awkwardly. He was definitely having problems with one of his legs, and I'm not sure if it's a knee, ankle. It's hard to say exactly what the injury was or whatever. I don't know if it's going to keep him out of action at all, but we'll have to see. It's just a situation worth monitoring. We probably won't get an update probably until tomorrow. Now, as I mentioned as well, some more news around the league. That's all we have for roster updates, but there was another move last night. Braden Point of the Tampa Bay Lightning, one of their top players, one of the top players in the league, obviously, actually was healthy scratched. And he was healthy scratched for violating team rules because he missed a meeting. So clearly, the NHL does take this very seriously. Most coaches would do this. It doesn't matter who the player is. If they don't set the example, then it's not really right. I know listening to former head coach Bruce Boudreau, who's got tons of coaching experience, says that when he was coaching the Capitals, which was very early in Ovechkin's career, Ovi himself actually missed a meeting, and he had the team fine Ovechkin instead of sitting him out. And he said he regretted it ever since, didn't find it set a good example. So clearly it's a big deal. I mean, it's nothing, he can't overcome by any means. It's just a meeting, but something that you have to set an example for. And certainly John Cooper quite comfortable doing that. Another update as well, Pittsburgh Penguin star forward Evgeny Malkin, who's currently on injured reserve. Apparently his family's home, they were victims of a burglary or break-in. No further comments from the player or the team or anybody at this time because it is under police investigation, but that's certainly not something you wish upon anybody, certainly not something you want to hear. So hopefully, the Malkins are doing okay, and hopefully, nothing too bad came from that. But yeah, it's unfortunate that their home was burglarized. So certainly keeping them in our thoughts here as they recover from that. The NHL continues to announce the quarter century teams. Today we got the updates from the Buffalo Sabres on the Sabres quarter century team. So team 1, led by Danny Briere, of course, current GM of the Philadelphia Flyers, Jason Pominville, and longtime Sabre Thomas Vanek. On the blue line, former first overall pick and current Buffalo Sabre Rasmus Dahlin and Brian Campbell. And between the pipes, longtime Sabres goalie Ryan Miller. Team number 2 was Chris Jarry, the current GM of the New York Rangers. Of course, current Vegas Golden Knights Stanley Cup champion Jack Eichel. Derek Royce, the third forward. And then Jay McKee and Tyler Myers are on the back end with Dominic Hasek between the pipes. The Sabres have had a lot of good players over the years for sure. A lot of those guys obviously played a long time ago with obviously only Dahlin and Eichel being a little bit more recently. It's even been a long time. Even though Tyler Myers is still playing, it's been a long time since he had been involved with the Sabres organization, where he was once upon considered the Calder Trophy winner in his rookie NHL season. Now, as I mentioned, lots of NHL rumors around the league, what we might see for some trade activity. I know there's lots of activity, lots of chatter, but not a lot of deals right now. But there is a belief that as we get closer to the Four Nation face-off break, that we probably will see a bit of a flurry of activities. It's expected because after the tournament and the NHL action resumes, there's less than 2 weeks before the NHL trade deadline. This doesn't give a lot of time for teams to really evaluate, players or potential moves. There is no roster freeze as well during this break for the tournament, so there very well could be trades during that. No given, just because there's a tournament going on doesn't mean there won't be any activity. So let's start with Vancouver, because we know the Canucks have been dominating the headlines for drama and Pettersson, Miller, this whole thing. One interesting tidbit that just came out in the last day, Cam Robertson, of course, who works for Elite Prospects, he's from BC, been around the game a while, mostly in a prospect role, but certainly has lots of contacts around the NHL. He appeared on the Sekeres and Price program, of course, which is a Canucks-based program in Vancouver, and he says that he's been told by good sources that Elias Pettersson is not the only star player on the Vancouver Canucks that's become fed up with JT Miller and how he conducts himself. Now, I guess depending on the wording of this and the interpretation of this, a lot of people have made the assumption that he's referring to Canucks captain Quinn Hughes. Now, Quinn Hughes, of course, is definitely a star player, an elite level defenseman in the NHL. But there is also Thatcher Demko. I think Demko is an elite level goaltender, although he's missed a lot of time this year. I mean, I imagine he's still been around the group. I think it's more likely Hughes that he's referring to, just because of Demko's, missed time. But again, like I said, not a given. I'm sure Demko, because he's been rehabbing and trying to get himself back. Obviously, he's, been back more recently here. I would think that he's, missed a lot of time, so it's less likely to be him. But you never know. He's also recently come back, and now this is coming out. So it's got to be one of the two. They don't have a lot of players that I would call star players. They have some really good players. So either way, it just goes to show that this may not be just an Elias Pettersson problem. And you got to remember with JT Miller, he does have a history of being hard on teammates, kind of wearing out his welcome. Originally with the New York Rangers, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that it was a shouting match with Henrik Lundqvist that spelled his end of his time with the Rangers. I mean, you're not going to, do that with their star goaltender, the King, and move on like that. Now, when he left Tampa, I don't know that there was anything like that. That was more of a salary cap move. We haven't heard any stories, at least that I'm aware of, for, rubbing teammates in Tampa the wrong way. But, with all the moves that they could have made, makes you wonder why Miller was the cap victim here. There was other players that could have been considered for that. Maybe they didn't. I'm not sure if his personality or demeanor kind of played a role. We can't say that it did by any means, but it just makes me wonder a little bit. So it kind of makes you think that if multiple star players are kind of feeling this way, that I would think that there's a more of a likelihood that if they do trade somebody, that it's probably preferred to be Miller. Now, the only problem is that Miller has trade protection. Pettersson does not. So, I mean, I know they're taking calls on both players, is what the speculation is around the league. They are trying to determine, what the offers could be, that should they consider this or not. It's really tough to say, but I would think that they would listen to their players. And, obviously I would think that if multiple star players are having issues here, that they've probably talked to somebody, a coach or management or somebody, right? So you have to think at this point that Miller would make more sense for them to move. But like I said, he's got trade protection. And, unless the offer for Pettersson is amazing, you're not probably going to do that. You have to be careful here. So we'll see. Obviously, when it comes to Pettersson, they were taking calls on him before he signed the extension, before they felt like he was, committing to the team. They were concerned. They were taking calls then just to gauge the market. So again, not completely sold on what they're going to do. I'm not 100% confident they're going to trade either one, but based on this, I do get the feeling that a Miller move makes more sense here. But we will see. Now, Brock Besser's a name. Nick Kypreos of Sportsnet put out a new article today, kind of breaking down all his latest intel about a variety of things around the league for players that he feels could be traded before the deadline. And Brock Besser's name has been brought up as well. There really, from all reports indicate, there hasn't been much work really done on an extension. The belief is that he's looking for an $8 million longer-term deal. I'm not sure the Canucks want to pay that. Clearly, they see him as a good player and, a player they'd probably like to keep, but everything boils down to business and money. So, for the right price is always how you finish those sentences, right? So with Brock Besser right now, it seems like they're not really budging on his price tag. I'm not convinced that there's really any hardcore talks or that they really pushed this too much. Kypreos kind of goes on to say that, for a team that's, hanging on to a wild card spot, should they be using their own rental or their own UFAs as rentals? Or should they probably need to be handling this in a different way to make sure that if they're not going to bring them back or they are at risk to lose them in the offseason, that they get a deal done and get some assets back? Besser and Miller both have been key members of this team. Maybe they both end up getting moved. It's hard to say. At least with Miller, they're not really forced to do it. It's just if they don't, they could continue to see these issues linger between he and Pettersson or potentially other members of the club. There is belief that other players are kind of getting annoyed by all this and would like to see the situation resolved. So I'm not sure how much pressure the team feels to get something done in that regard. But like I said, with everything, it sounds like Miller's a more likely candidate based on what we've seen there. But certainly seems reasonable that Besser could go too. They were division champions last year. Now they're barely a wild card team. Things have definitely, changed for a bit there for sure. Now, another name to watch, and according to Kypreos, is Carolina for a team. He feels that the Hurricanes are going to want to make a big splash. Between goaltending, as I mentioned before, there's some uncertainty between the pipes. But they also have some uncertainty up front, and they've been missing that elite level scorer. I know the name that we thought was going to be traded last summer was Marty Necas. It never happened. He signed a 2-year deal, got a bit of a raise, seemed happy to come back, get off to a super hot start. There was, early in the season he was leading the league in scoring, but he has cooled off substantially. So he's kind of come back down to earth here, if you will. And the belief from Kypreos is that if the Carolina Hurricanes want to make a big splash, and he believes they do after, numerous playoff attempts and not getting over that hump and getting to a Stanley Cup final, that, obviously using, a player like Necas might be something that they have to do. They're obviously the two sides kind of made up, if you will, and got him to terms on his contract. But, if they're uncertain over his consistency and what the next contract's going to look like, and being, more than halfway through the first year of a 2-year deal, he would be eligible for a contract extension here now. So, again, the belief is that there is a possibility that he could end up getting moved. So we'll have to wait and see, where things go here. But certainly the Hurricanes are going to be a team to watch. We know they've made some moves last year with Jake Gensel. They haven't gotten over that hump though to get past that conference final into a Stanley Cup final and really try to sink their teeth into that, because they've been a good team for quite a while and they've had playoff success to some degree, but not to the level they were hoping for. So I really do wonder if Necas could be involved in a blockbuster deal to bring more talent to this team, or a really, superstar player. There's some people that think that Tom Dundon's starting to get to a point where he's more willing to open his wallet. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, that's definitely something big to watch and consider. I wonder if Necas could end up being a trade target after, kind of putting all that to rest at the beginning of the season. And lastly, in Toronto, a name that he mentions as a player that they really, really like and really would like to bring to Toronto is Scott Mayfield of the New York Islanders. Now, of course, big right shot defenseman. He's signed until 29-30, so he comes with a lot of term, not a ton of money at $3.5 million. He's got good size, decent ability to move the puck, physical, There's lots to like. He's a really good third pair defenseman. And at this point, we don't even really have reason to believe that the New York Islanders will trade Scott Mayfield. We know that Lou Lamoriello is, kind of set in his ways. We know that he seems to believe in his team way more than the fan base does. Hopefully, for their sake, we do see some turnover, because everything that he has said kind of makes it sound like it's more of the same, not much change on the horizon. But you have to think, though, that with the pending UFAs they have, with Brock Nelson, Kyle Palmieri, the way the team has played, they're slowly slipping away from having any chance of recovering from the playoffs or for the playoffs, that, we might finally see some veterans moved out like Nelson and Palmieri that are on their last year of their contract. I think, Brock Nelson has a good chance to end up with Minnesota. Kyle Palmieri's been linked to his former team, the Devils. I don't know if they'll go as far as trading players with term, like a Scott Mayfield. Like I said, they like that long-term contract. He fits well there. He signed. Doesn't really have to go anywhere. So it's not a given at all that Mayfield gets traded. But the intel from Kyprios here is that the Maple Leafs really like what he brings, and they'd love to get their hands on him. But again, that's easier said than done. So it's kind of difficult to say, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the Maple Leafs continue to maybe try to make that blue line even deeper for the playoffs. But getting Mayfield would be a big upgrade, especially where they've been in the rumor mill considering to bring back John Klingberg. I think Mayfield would be a much better option. But at this point, like I said, it's not really clear that the team even wants to consider moving him, and I think the offer would have to kind of blow them away to really take advantage here and get it and make it go through. So we'll see what happens. Let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.